You know that feeling, right? That subtle pull. Maybe you think you felt your phone vibrate, or it's just sitting there, and like almost without thinking, your hand just reaches out, unlocks it, and suddenly you're just diving into that screen. 1 minute, the quick check, maybe the news, and the next thing you know, hours have just vanished, gone. Or maybe it's that feeling where you have to keep scrolling the headlines, even when every single one feels like, I don't know, a punch. And you just feel worse afterwards.
It's so common. These devices, they're amazing tools, obviously essential now for, connecting, information, everything. But sometimes, sometimes it feels less like we're driving.
Exactly. It feels like they're kind of subtly running the show.
It's a really pervasive feeling, that switch from engagement to overwhelm or even compulsion. It's definitely a big feature of, living now.
Absolutely. And that right there, that's our mission today on the Deep Dive. We're going to intentionally unplug just for a bit from that infinite scroll and really take a deep, thoughtful look at two really key modern digital things, doom scrolling and digital detox. We'll unpack what they actually mean, look at the, honestly, sometimes surprising or even alarming science behind how they're hitting our brains, our well-being, and maybe most importantly, share some real actionable insights, practical strategies, all fresh from recent research to help you navigate this hyper-connected world a bit more mindfully.
With more purpose, maybe.
Yeah, and for this deep dive, we've gathered, well, a really fascinating mix of sources. It gives us a pretty comprehensive picture, I think.
Okay.
We'll draw from, rigorous research papers, proper scientific journals, looking at the neurology, the psychology, but importantly, we're balancing that out with very relatable, real-world stuff, experiences and wisdom from online communities, where people are actually in the thick of it, figuring things out.
That blend sounds great. Science and real life. Exactly. It gives us a more sort of holistic view. And all the studies are current, pretty much between 2019 and 2024. So the information is definitely relevant to what you're likely experiencing right now. It's not just theory, it's grounded in the present.
Okay, so with that set up, let's really, let's dig in. Let's unpack these terms, starting with that one that just sounds bad. Doom scrolling. What is it exactly? I mean, it sounds obvious, right? Scrolling bad news. Is it more complicated?
You're right. The name is pretty vivid, isn't it?
Yeah.
Research defines it quite specifically as this tendency to compulsively consume negative content, especially on social media. It's actually been called an unfortunate trait of individuals in the modern machine age, which really highlights how normal it's become.
Wow. Unfortunate trait. It's quite a label.
It is. And it's not just seeing the negative stuff. It's the active, often unconscious seeking it out, sticking with it. Think about times you've just kept consuming distressing news, even when, intellectually, you knew it was making you feel worse.
Oh, yeah. Countless times. It's like, you should look away, but you just keep refreshing, keep scrolling. Why? What makes social media specifically such fertile ground for this?
Well, social media platforms are definitely a major factor. A key reason is those really sophisticated, personalized recommendation engines, the algorithms.
The algorithms, of course.
Right. They're meticulously designed to push emotion-heavy news, fear, outrage, anxiety, sadness, because that stuff gets more engagement, more clicks, shares, comments, more time scrolling.
So bad news keeps us hooked.
Pretty much. It leads to what studies call excessive use of social media to consume negative news. So even if your first impulse is genuine, I just want to know what's going on, the research is clear. Satisfying that urge, especially compulsively, does lead to unpleasant psychological impacts. Things like anxiety, stress, even depression.
It's a cruel twist, isn't it? Trying to stay informed makes you feel worse.
It's a real paradox.
And it's not just news feeds, right? I remember seeing someone on Reddit mention they doom scroll Perot on Grab Food, like endlessly scrolling food delivery options, not ordering, just looking, feeling anxious. That really struck me.
That's a perfect example.
It shows it's not just Twitter or Facebook news, it's the compulsive consumption itself.
Absolutely. That's a crucial distinction. It highlights that doom scrolling is fundamentally a behavioral pattern. This habit of seeking and consuming often negative or stressful info they can spill over into almost any app with an endless feed.
Any endless feed. Wow.
Yeah, it's about that psychological loop.
Yeah.
Craving, anticipating, consuming. Doesn't matter if it's news headlines or takeaway menus. It just shows how deep that scrolling habit goes.
Okay, so if doom scrolling is this widespread issue,
Right.
What's the counter movement? The solution everyone seems to be talking about. That brings us to digital detox. I hear that phrase everywhere now.
You really do. It's definitely gaining traction. Formally, a digital detox is when someone intentionally stays disconnected from devices or social media for a defined duration.
For how long, typically?
It varies. Could be hours, a day, a week, longer. But it's becoming a big health and wellness trend. Research sees it as a viable solution to push back against the negative effects of too much phone use on well-being, relationships, focus, you name it. It's about consciously trying to get some control back.
Like hitting pause, a digital cleanse. Is it just about duration, or is there a deeper motivation?
The core idea, whether it's a short break or, a longer thing, seems driven by a desire for a new rhythm and a pause from the typical schedule. It's about wanting to step off the treadmill of notifications and pings.
Yeah, escape the constant buzz.
Exactly. It's a conscious choice to create space, mental space, physical space that technology usually fills up, and just be present in the non-digital world for a bit. Find a different pace.
Okay, this is where, for me, it gets really interesting because we're not just talking habits here. We're getting into what's actually happening inside our heads.
Yeah.
The neuroscience. Let's dive into that. Our poor, overstimulated brains, the amygdala, prefrontal cortex, HPA axis, sounds serious.
It is serious, but understanding it is key. These biological mechanisms explain why it feels so compelling and why the effects are so real. So, first up, the amygdala.
Okay.
Think of it as your brain's alarm system. Tiny, almond-shaped, but it processes fear, threats, strong emotions. Studies show that repetitive exposure to distressing news overstimulates the amygdala.
Like a smoke alarm that just won't shut off.
Exactly like that. It keeps blaring, maybe quietly, maybe loudly, picking up these constant danger signals from your screen.
That sounds exhausting, just being constantly on edge like that. What does that do to you?
Well, this hyperactivation heightens feelings of anxiety and creates a persistent state of stress. Imagine living with that constant low-level alarm. It just drains you. And the big consequence, it starts disrupting emotional regulation and mental well-being.
So you can't manage your emotions as well.
Right. And what makes it worse is that when the amygdala is freaking out, the part of your brain that should calm it down, the prefrontal cortex, struggles to do its job. This inability of the prefrontal cortex to regulate the amygdala's responses further exacerbates emotional instability, which leads to things like messed up sleep, less emotional control. Basically, your brain's brakes aren't working right.
Which brings us straight to that prefrontal cortex. That's the grown-up part of the brain, right?
Yeah.
Planning, decisions, focus.
That's the one, the executive suite. And all this constant information processing from scrolling, it taxes the brain's working memory, your mental scratch pad, and specifically overloads the prefrontal cortex.
So it's like trying to run too many programs at once.
Perfect analogy. It governs those crucial functions: decision-making, attention, and self-control. Filtering distractions, making rational choices, staying disciplined.
So if that part is overloaded,
Yeah.
what does that feel like day to day? Like if I'm trying to study or meet a work deadline?
Well, for students, it translates directly to cognitive fatigue, impaired focus, and reduced capacity to manage academic tasks effectively. It's why you might read the same sentence over and over, or zone out in a meeting, or just feel like complex tasks are impossible.
Yeah, I know that feeling.
And this reduced function also leads to difficulties in managing emotions and is linked to symptoms of depression like hopelessness and emotional fatigue. You just don't have the mental horsepower left. And it's measurable. Neuroimaging studies show that individuals engaging in frequent doom-scrolling display diminished prefrontal cortex function. It's a real physical impact.
Wow, okay, so the emotional bit is hyper, the thinking bit is sluggish. Sounds like a recipe for chronic stress, which I guess leads us to the HPA axis, the body's stress system.
Exactly right. The hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis. It's our central stress response system. And prolonged doom-scrolling triggers chronic activation of the HPA axis, which means elevated cortisol levels.
Cortisol, the stress hormone. A little bit is good, it helps you react, but too much for too long. That's bad news, isn't it?
Very bad news long term. Chronic high cortisol disrupts brain structures like the hippocampus, which is vital for memory and learning, and it further messes with the prefrontal cortex.
So it hits memory and decision-making.
Yep. Impairs cognitive functions crucial for success, academic or professional. And beyond the brain stuff, it undermines emotional resilience, making anxiety and depression worse. Over time, this chronic stress contributes to inflammation, weakens the immune system, even affects metabolism. It's a whole body response.
Okay, so it's a full-on brain and body assault from scrolling. That's intense. But it can't just be fear and stress driving this, can it? There's that pull, that craving. Which brings us to dopamine, right? The dopamine dilemma.
Precisely. This is where behavioral reinforcement theory, Skinner's work, comes in. Basically, behaviors that get rewarded tend to get repeated.
And the reward online is often that little hit of dopamine, the feel-good chemical.
Exactly. Doomscrolling exploits the brain's dopaminergic reward system very effectively. It gets activated by intermittent exposure to sensational or emotionally charged content.
Intermittent, like a slot machine. You never know when the next win or shocking headline will pop up.
That's a great analogy. The unpredictability is key. That anticipation, plus the occasional hit, a really juicy bit of gossip, a shocking event, something that confirms your biases, keeps you pulling the lever or, flicking your thumb.
So each scroll, each potential new bit of info could be a tiny dopamine burst. It's like a constant loop.
That's the cycle. Each release of dopamine reinforces the behavior, creating a cycle of craving and gratification. Scroll, maybe get a hit, want more. It's incredibly powerful. And the long-term effect, it's worrying. Over time, this leads to addictive doom-scrolling patterns that exacerbate emotional exhaustion and reduce sensitivity to positive stimuli.
Wait, reduce sensitivity to positive things?
Yeah, it can actually change your brain's reward pathways, makes you less sensitive to everyday joys, simple pleasures, while making you crave more extreme or shocking stuff online. It impairs mental health, academic focus. It trains your brain to chase the next big, often negative hit.
Okay, so we get the what and the how in the brain. Let's talk about the results, the tangible impacts you actually feel or see in life. Mental health first. We mentioned anxiety, stress. The research actually puts numbers on that, right?
It does, which really drives it home. The review we looked at found a strong association between doom scrolling and elevated levels of anxiety and stress among students. And it's quantified. A strong positive correlation of plus 0.45 with anxiety.
Plus 0.45, that sounds significant.
It is. Means more doom scrolling is very likely linked to higher anxiety. And there's a moderate positive correlation of plus 0.38 with stress. Both statistically significant, highly unlikely to be just chance.
So it's proven link. Scroll more bad stuff, feel more anxious and stressed. What about depression? That feeling of hopelessness, is that linked too?
Absolutely. The research directly links doom scrolling to depressive symptoms, such as hopelessness and emotional fatigue. And remember, that's made worse by the impaired prefrontal cortex, affecting emotional control. There's a positive correlation of plus 0.40 with depression.
Wow. So across the board, anxiety, stress, depression, it's a heavy toll.
It's a vicious cycle, really. The behavior contributes to the mood issues, and the low mood can make it harder to stop the behavior.
And this isn't just like a Western problem or specific to one country, right? This feels global.
Definitely global. A study in India, for instance, found almost 25% of young people had elevated scores on cell phone dependency. And for those with excessive use, worse overall sleep. Sleep is foundational, so that has knock-on effects for everything. It shows how widespread these digital dependency issues are.
Okay, so it messes with how we feel. What about how we perform? School, work. You mentioned the cognitive load. Let's look at that performance hit.
Yeah, the impact on performance is pretty stark. Doom scrolling inflicts a significant cognitive burden, as we said, overwhelming working memory and executive functions. Your brain just can't keep up with demanding tasks.
What does that look like in practice? Like day to day?
Students report challenges in concentrating during lectures, completing assignments, and retaining information. And again, there's data. A strong negative correlation of negative 0.42 with cognitive performance.
Negative 0.42. So more scrolling, lower cognitive performance.
Measurably.
Measurably. It actively undermines your ability to think clearly, focus, remember things, just learn effectively.
And if your brain's tired and foggy from all that junk information, I guess, your motivation, your engagement must drop too.
Exactly. The emotional exhaustion stemming from doom scrolling severely undermines students' ability to engage. It shows up as real things: absenteeism, missed deadlines, and declining grades. There's a moderately negative correlation of manageable 1.31 for academic engagement.
So you just check out, basically.
Pretty much. And a big meta-analysis looking at 20 studies found a significant negative correlation between doom scrolling and academic success. The pattern is clear. More doom scrolling generally equals worse outcomes.
And this isn't just students. For those of us working, especially remotely now, the lines are so blurred we're always on. Absolutely critical point. Research on employee well-being found 86%. 86. Of those surveyed, believe that the failure to detach from tech outside work hours negatively impacted their well-being.
86%.
Wow. Especially with remote work, where your office is your pocket. The inability to disconnect hits performance, creativity, everything. It's a universal, modern challenge.
Okay, so we're feeling these effects. Our brains are struggling. Who's helping this along? The silent partner. We mentioned algorithms earlier. Let's really focus on their role. They aren't neutral, are they?
Not at all. They're central to the problem. Powerful accelerators. Recommendation algorithms play a crucial role in perpetuating doom-scrolling behaviors. They aren't just showing you stuff. They're designed to maximize engagement. And unfortunately, highly emotional content, fear, anger, morbid curiosity is super engaging.
So they learn what makes you stop scrolling, what makes you react, and then feed you more of that even if it's negative. A feedback loop.
Precisely. These algorithms curate emotionally charged content based on user interaction patterns, thereby reinforcing a distressing feedback loop. It's not an accident, it's optimization. And this cycle, as we said, hits the dopamine system, reinforcing the craving.
Or the reward system.
But it also amplifies amygdala activation, heightens emotional distress. So it feeds the craving and the fear at the same time, making it incredibly hard to look away.
Wow, so they're basically pushing both our addiction buttons and our fear buttons simultaneously. That's quite a combination.
It creates a truly vicious cycle. People trapped in it face deteriorating psychological and cognitive outcomes because the platform itself is, in a way, optimized against their well-being in favor of their attention.
It's designed to keep you hooked, not necessarily happy or productive.
That's a good way to put it.
Okay, so given all these downsides, the addiction, the algorithms, a digital detox seems like the obvious answer, right? Just stop. But it's not that easy, is it? There are real psychological reasons why disconnecting is hard.
No, it's definitely not always simple. Research points to various mental barriers and difficulties with technology people face when trying to change their habits, even on a holiday. It's not just about, can I connect, but should I or do I need to?
Like FOMO, fear of missing out,
Oh,
or feeling obligated to be available.
exactly. There's this idea of a broader digital gap, which isn't just about access. It includes disparities in intention, drive, sentiment, inherent variables, and subjectivity. So having the option to disconnect isn't enough. Our internal landscape, fears, beliefs, social pressures plays a huge role.
What are some of those internal hurdles, those psychological things that keep us glued even when we know better?
Things like a lack of trust, maybe fear of missing vital info, work stuff, social cues, the need for leisure and personal growth, which ironically people often seek through their devices, and other psychological, inherent, and emotional limitations. One study highlighted two really interesting themes from detox experiences: resisting temptation, the digital diet, and in search of the perfect self, actual versus ideal.
In search of the perfect self.
Wow. So our online image, or needing to maintain it, is a barrier.
Precisely. The study suggests that tech like phones and social media can be seen as a menace to one's principles, self-control, and self-worth. There's this pressure to be online, be seen, keep up. Even if detoxing is meant to reduce that pressure, people still feel digital tools are essential for work, study, social life.
It's a conflict then.
A deep psychological conflict. Tension between the calm, focused person you want to be and the digital demands pulling you into maybe a less ideal version of yourself. It's a battle for self-control, really.
Okay, so it's complex. Brain chemistry, psychology, algorithms. But there is hope, right? There are practical things we can do. Let's shift to solutions. What did we actually learn from people who did a digital detox? Anything surprising?
Actually, yes, quite surprising and encouraging findings. You might think a detox would be agony, right?
Yeah, pretty much. But the research found many participants found the experience manageable and even enjoyable. They said it was less challenging than anticipated. That's huge. It suggests maybe our fear of disconnecting is worse than the reality.
That is encouraging. Maybe we overestimate our dependence, but it wasn't all easy, I assume.
Definitely not all easy. Several individuals experienced sensations of alienation and loneliness, especially at the start. But the good news, these adverse emotions did not result in the cessation of their involvement. People felt it, but pushed through.
Okay, so discomfort is possible, but not necessarily a deal breaker.
Right. Also, a lot of people reported heightened feelings of ennui, boredom, restlessness, especially in those little gaps where they'd normally grab their phone. And interestingly, people often ended up substituting social networking sites with different kinds of time spent on screens, maybe without even realizing it.
Ah, so swapping one screen habit for another, like watching more TV or playing games instead of scrolling Instagram.
Exactly. It shows the habit of screen stimulation is deep, even if the specific app changes.
But what about after the detox? Did the benefits last, or did people snap right back?
This is key. The research shows positive long-term effects. Statistical analysis demonstrated favorable or neutral enhancements in addictions and related health results, like less dependency, better sleep, less anxiety. And importantly, these improvements continue to be seen during the 2 weeks afterwards.
2 weeks later, that's promising.
It is. It suggests it's not just temporary relief. Participants often developed a heightened awareness of their online communication patterns and implemented measures to control their use. So the detox itself seems to foster lasting changes in mindfulness and self-control. It breaks that unconscious pattern.
Okay, that's powerful. So knowing this, what are the concrete recommendations from the experts
Yeah.
and also from those everyday users on Reddit? What actually works for detoxing or just managing scrolling?
Well, the research offers several practical, personalized ideas. Things like reducing stringent deadlines, don't try to quit everything overnight, make gradual changes. Implement personalized limitations based on your triggers, not some generic rule. And a big one, devise tactics to regulate alerts and their use.
Turn off notifications. Yes, that feels huge.
It really is. They're designed to pull you back in. Also, carefully limiting accessibility to specific uses. Maybe your phone is for calls, not endless browsing. And for a proper detox, they suggest delete or log out of their social networking accounts during that period. Makes it harder to impulsively slip back. Adds friction.
Creates a barrier to the impulse. Okay.
Yeah.
What about instead of scrolling? What activities help fill that time?
The recommendations focus on reconnecting with the physical world. Obvious things like unplugging completely for set periods, using time management, scheduling specific tech times and tech-free times, and being mindful, asking why you're picking up the device.
Be intentional about it.
Exactly. Plus, physical activities like walking, yoga, sports, great distractions, good for you anyway. Reading physical books, not ebooks. And crucially, spending time outdoors in nature, which is incredibly restorative for the mind.
Good. Classic advice. Now let's get into the user hacks, the stuff from Reddit. What clever tricks did people on the front lines come up with?
Oh, some really great practical stuff. Journaling was huge. One person said, just do it in any way that you want. Diary, gratitude, scrapbook. They felt it was more grounded and helped them connect with yourself deeper. A constructive outlet instead of passive scrolling.
I like that. Active reflection versus passive consumption. What else?
Strict app control. Either quitting cold turkey, just deleting the tempting apps, or using paid app blockers. Some found specific ones very strict, meaning you literally can't bypass them easily. Takes willpower out of it.
Forces compliance with your own goals.
Sure. Yeah. And even more intense, external accountability. Setting a phone timer with a password only a friend knows, or a student giving their phone to their mom, only getting it back at set times like lunch and 9:10 p.m.
Wow, that's serious accountability. But I can see how it would work if you're really stuck. What about small daily habit changes?
Big focus on the morning routine. Advice like never to start the day using the phone. Keep it across the room. Use an old school alarm clock. Prevents falling into the scroll trap first thing.
Break the cycle before it starts.
And another clever one, behavioral interruption. Rearrange your apps. Your muscle memory makes you tap the wrong thing, which gives you that split second to pause, break the trance, and think, wait, why did I pick up my phone?
Huh. Messing with muscle memory.
Huh?
I like that. It sounds like a lot of the scrolling comes from just being bored but wanting stimulation.
That's a key insight from users. Doomscrolling happens when you're idle while still craving mental activity. So, the solution. Take up a hobby, get yourself busy with anything else that doesn't require holding your phone. Someone put it perfectly. Don't make doomscrolling your hobby.
Ouch. But true. It's such an easy default. What if just being idle is hard? Like sitting still feels impossible.
Yeah, for people struggling with that, the advice was, 1, start meditating to get your brain used to being truly idle, even just tiny amounts. Or, if meditation feels too much, try doing your course tasks while listening to music or audiobooks.
Productive distraction.
Exactly. Creates guilt-free productivity. You're busy, your mind is engaged, but without the visual screen trigger. Trains your brain it's okay not to have constant visual input.
Guilt-free productivity. Love it. Any final bits of wisdom from the users?
One person suggested during burnout, look into motivational quotes instead. Sometimes you just need that little spike of motivation. And maybe the most powerful analogy that ties it all together. Diet is also the things we consume mentally.
Wow. Yeah. Diet is also the things we consume mentally. That really lands. A perfect takeaway.
It's a great reminder to be intentional.
So, okay, we have covered a lot today in this deep dive. We've seen doom scrolling and digital overload aren't just, minor bad habits. They physically impact our brains, messing with fear centers, executive function, stress hormones.
Right. Leading to real increases in anxiety, stress, depression, and hitting our ability to focus and perform, whether at school or work.
And we saw how those algorithms are constantly, quietly amplifying the problem, exploiting our brain's reward system in this really tricky feedback loop.
But the encouraging part is that strategies like digital detox, even short ones, genuinely work. They lead to measurable improvements in things like dependency and well-being, and those benefits often stick around. There's lasting change possible.
Yeah, it might be uncomfortable at first, boredom, feeling disconnected, but the research and just hearing from people who've done it shows the benefits are real and worthwhile. It boils down to awareness, doesn't it? And making intentional choices.
Absolutely. Building that awareness of your own patterns and then consciously putting measures in place to control your engagement instead of letting it control you. It's about reclaiming that agency.
The mix of science and user tips gives us a really practical toolkit, I think. From setting limits and blocking apps to finding new hobbies and just being more mindful. It's about breaking those compulsive cycles and filling the space with better stuff for our minds, our bodies, our well-being.
It really is about reclaiming your mental space, your attention.
Okay, so here's a final thought to leave you with, something to mull over after this deep dive. Given how pervasive these algorithms are, how constant the pull of our devices feels, how can we move beyond just reacting to technology? How can we actually proactively design our digital lives so they serve us, our goals, our well-being, and not the other way around? Yeah,
Maybe think about it like this. Being truly well-informed today isn't just about consuming endless information. It's about consciously curating your digital experience. Choosing wisely, with purpose, understanding the impact it has, building a digital life that actually supports your clarity, your balance, and helps you thrive rather than holding you back.